Have you ever found yourself strangely drawn to a character from a movie, a book, or maybe even an anime? Not just enjoying them as entertainment, but actually feeling something deeper. Maybe it started as a casual admiration. You liked their style, their charm, their courage. But slowly, it began to feel real, almost like love. This phenomenon might sound unusual at first. How can anyone fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist? But here's the surprising truth. It's more common than most people realize. And in fact, it has a name: fictophilia. The experience of developing romantic or emotional feelings toward fictional characters. Now pause for a moment and think about it. We live in a world saturated with stories, movies, novels, video games, streaming shows, comics, and even virtual influencers. Every day we are surrounded by characters who feel real, speak to us in personal ways, and invite us into their worlds. And the human brain, the very structure of how we imagine, empathize, and project emotions, does not always make a sharp distinction between what is real and what is fictional. So when someone says they are in love with a character like Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice, or Levi Ackerman from Attack on Titan, or maybe a character from a video game like Final Fantasy or Mass Effect, the emotions they feel are not a joke, and they are not simply pretend. They are tapping into the same neural pathways of love, longing, and attachment that we use in real life. But here's where things get fascinating. If these emotions are genuine, if the feelings are real, then what does that say about us? What does it reveal about how we experience love, desire, and human connection? And is it necessarily a bad thing to be in love with a fictional character? Or could it actually tell us something profound about the way stories shape our reality? In this video, we are going to dive deep into the world of fictophilia. We will explore why it happens, what psychology says about it, how storytelling and fandoms play a role, and whether it should be seen as harmless or harmful. And along the way, we'll touch on some deeper philosophical questions, like whether emotions need a real object to be valid, or if love is simply an experience of the heart and mind, no matter where it points itself. So buckle up, because what seems like a quirky obsession might actually open the door to one of the most fascinating insights about human nature, that the stories we consume don't just entertain us, they shape us, move us, and sometimes they even capture our hearts. So what exactly is fictophilia? At first, the word might sound like some complicated piece of psychology jargon, but at its core, it's very simple. It comes from two roots: ficto, meaning fictional, and philia, meaning love or attraction. Put those together, and you get a very direct definition. Fictophilia is the experience of developing romantic, emotional, or even sexual attraction toward fictional characters. Now, pause and let that sink in, because if you think about it, almost everyone has brushed against this feeling at some point. Maybe you read a book and found yourself daydreaming about one of the characters long after you put it down. Maybe you watched a movie and thought, if this person were real, I'd be completely in love with them. Or maybe you played a video game and felt such a strong bond with a character that they felt more alive to you than the people sitting in the same room. That's fictophilia in action. But let's make an important distinction here. Fictophilia is not just saying, wow, that actor is attractive, or that celebrity crush is my dream partner. That's admiration for a real person who happens to play a role. Fictophilia is something much more specific. It's about falling for the character themselves, the way they speak, the way they think, their struggles, their victories, their quirks, their flaws, their charm. Think of Elizabeth Bennet in Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. For over 200 years, readers have been captivated by her wit, her independence, and her sharp sense of humor. Or consider characters from anime like Naruto Uzumaki, whose determination and loneliness strike a deep chord with fans, or Mikasa Ackerman, whose loyalty and quiet strength inspire devotion. In the world of gaming, characters like Commander Shepard from Mass Effect or Aerith from Final Fantasy become more than pixels. They become companions, partners, sometimes even soulmates in the minds of players. And here's the fascinating part. These feelings can be just as real, just as intense, and just as emotionally consuming as love for a real-life person. Because your brain doesn't necessarily care whether the object of affection exists in the physical world. What your brain responds to is story, emotion, presence, and connection, and fictional characters are designed, crafted with precision, to embody those very things. Now, fictophilia doesn't look the same for everyone. For some, it's lighthearted and temporary, like a passing crush that fades after the book or show ends. You enjoy the character. You maybe think about them for a while, and then you move on. But for others, it can run much deeper. Entire communities online are filled with people who describe their relationships with fictional characters in serious terms. They write fan fiction, they create artwork, they hold virtual weddings, they celebrate anniversaries, and they talk about these characters as if they were truly part of their lives. And before you dismiss this as silly or delusional, consider this. Human beings have always formed emotional bonds with stories, ancient myths about gods and heroes, epic poems like the Iliad or the Ramayana, Shakespeare's characters, who still make audiences cry hundreds of years later. This isn't a new phenomenon. What's new is that today, the intensity of storytelling is stronger than ever. High-definition animation, immersive video games, sprawling fantasy novels, streaming series that run for years. All of these give us more time, more depth, and more connection to characters than any previous generation ever experienced. Now imagine this. You're watching a show, and over the course of dozens of episodes, you see a character grow up, suffer, fight, love, lose, and rebuild themselves. By the end, they feel like someone you've known for years. Your brain stores memories of them in the same way it stores memories of real people. And when you feel joy at their victories, or sadness at their pain, your emotions are not fake. They are real, and that is the essence of fictophilia, real emotions, directed toward fictional beings. The key question then is this: why does it happen? Why can our hearts love someone who isn't real, someone who only exists in imagination and story? To answer that, we have to step into psychology, into the architecture of the human mind, where fantasy and reality blur in ways far more powerful than most people realize. And that's where we'll go next. So why does fictophilia happen? Why can the human heart, and more importantly, the human mind, form such powerful attachments to people who don't actually exist in the physical world? To understand this, we need to explore the psychological foundations of love, attachment, and imagination. First, let's talk about projection. Human beings are constantly projecting their desires, their fears, and their unmet needs onto others in real life. This happens all the time. You meet someone new, and in your mind you begin to imagine who they are, what they're like, and what they could mean to you. You fill in the gaps with your own hopes. Fictional characters are perfect for this, because they are written, drawn, or designed with just enough detail to feel alive, but also with enough openness that our minds can project onto them whatever we most long for. Think about it. A character might be courageous and noble, but still vulnerable in a way that makes them relatable, or they might embody an ideal of beauty, loyalty, or intelligence that feels missing in the people around you. And because they are fictional, they will never reject you, never betray you, never do something outside of the role you've already imagined for them. In a sense, fictophilia creates the ultimate safe space for the heart. Next, consider parasocial relationships. This is a term psychologists use to describe one-sided relationships we form with media figures, like TV hosts, YouTubers, or celebrities. You feel like you know them, even though they have no idea who you are. Your brain, however, doesn't make a big distinction. It treats the emotional bond as real. Now take that same mechanism and apply it to fictional characters. Instead of bonding with a celebrity who exists in the real world, you're bonding with a character in a story. A character who, in many ways, feels even more accessible because you can see their innermost struggles, their private moments, their deepest secrets, But it goes deeper than that. Our brains are wired for storytelling from childhood. Humans learn about the world through stories, fairy tales, myths, bedtime stories. Stories teach us morality, empathy, and imagination, and the brain doesn't just listen passively. It simulates. Neuroscientists call this narrative transportation. When you are so absorbed in a story that your brain begins to treat it as if it were happening to you, the same neural pathways that light up when you feel joy, grief, or love in real life also light up when you experience those emotions through characters in fiction. This is why you cry when a beloved character dies, why your heart races during a tense moment in a film, why you feel happiness when your favorite couple finally confesses their love. The emotions are real, the context may be fictional, but the brain does not draw a sharp line between the two. There's also the role of memory and attachment. Every time you return to a story, rereading a book, replaying a game, rewatching an anime, you reinforce the emotional bond. The character becomes part of your personal history. You can remember where you were when you first encountered them. You can recall the emotions they evoked in you in a very real sense. They become a part of your life narrative. And let's not forget about loneliness and unmet needs. In a world where many people struggle to form deep connections, fictional characters can provide comfort, stability, and even a sense of companionship. They don't judge, they don't leave. They are always there, waiting in the pages, on the screen, or in the code of a game for someone who feels isolated. That can be profoundly meaningful. Now, does this mean fictophilia is purely escapism? Not exactly. Escapism suggests running away from reality. But in many cases, people aren't escaping, they're exploring, they're using fictional characters to understand their own desires, to process their emotions, to learn about what kind of partner they want, or even to confront parts of themselves they might not be ready to face in real relationships. Imagine this. A teenager feels invisible at school, overlooked, misunderstood, but in a novel they meet a character who struggles in the same way and triumphs. That bond isn't just fantasy, it's healing, it's affirming, it's teaching resilience. Or imagine an adult who has gone through heartbreak and finds comfort in a character who offers unconditional love. That emotional support may not come from a real person, but the effect on the heart can still be real. So when we ask, why does fictophilia happen? The answer is layered. It happens because our brains are wired to connect, because stories are designed to evoke emotion, because projection fills in the gaps of what we lack, because parasocial bonds are indistinguishable from real ones to the mind, and because ultimately, love itself in all its forms is more about how we feel than about whether the object of that feeling exists in the physical world. And that brings us to an even deeper question. If our emotions are real, but the character is not, does that make the love any less valid? Or is fictophilia simply another expression of the boundless human capacity to connect, to care, and to love? Why do fictional characters feel so alive? Why can words on a page, drawings on a screen, or voices in a game stir emotions in us as if we were dealing with real people? The answer lies in the immense power of storytelling, one of the oldest, most fundamental forces shaping human life. For tens of thousands of years, stories have been with us. Around firelight, our ancestors told myths of gods, heroes, and monsters, tales that explain the stars above, the storms in the sky, the struggles of the heart. These stories were not distractions. They were survival tools, teaching lessons about danger, morality, community, and hope. And with every telling, people bonded not just with each other, but with the characters who lived in those tales. Fast forward to today, and the machinery of storytelling has only grown more sophisticated: books, television, anime, films, video games. Each medium adds new layers of immersion. They transport us deeper into other worlds, surround us with sound, imagery, music, and dialogue, and the characters who inhabit those worlds feel more vivid than ever. When you binge a series, you may spend dozens of hours living alongside a character, watching them grow, suffer, triumph, they become companions in your inner life, woven into the fabric of your memory just as tightly as real people you've known. And here's the secret. Our brains are not very good at separating fiction from reality when it comes to emotion. That's why you cry when a character dies, or cheer when they succeed. The story tricks the mind into reacting as though it were real, and the stronger the story, the stronger the bond. It's not simply the character you love, it's the narrative that breathes life into them, the web of meaning that makes their joys and sorrows matter to you. Characters resonate because they mirror us. The awkwardness of a shy protagonist reflects our own insecurities. The strength of a noble hero reflects our longing for courage. Even the flaws of villains can grip us, because they exaggerate the darker sides of ourselves we rarely admit. In these mirrors, we see not only who we are, but who we wish to be, or who we fear becoming. Modern media intensifies this connection. In anime, a character's voice and music can carry an emotional weight that lingers long after the screen fades to black. In novels, rich descriptions pull you into inner worlds so detailed that the characters feel like old friends. In games, you don't just watch, you participate. You make choices, fight battles, save companions. That interactivity creates a unique intimacy, making characters feel not just real but yours. And here's the deeper truth. Fictophilia is not a bizarre glitch in human psychology. It is the natural outcome of how powerfully stories shape us. From the beginning of human culture, stories have created figures who feel real. Gods, spirits, heroes, lovers. We have always been wired to connect with the imagined. The only difference now is that modern storytelling delivers characters with such richness and depth that our emotions respond just as they would to flesh and blood people. So when someone says, "It's silly to love a fictional character," they are ignoring thousands of years of human history. Stories have always been capable of stirring real emotions, of shaping lives, of making us weep, hope, and dream. Fictophilia is not a break from that tradition, but a continuation of it, a reminder that the boundary between reality and imagination is not where we think it is, because, in the realm of emotion, imagination has always been real enough. Here lies one of the most delicate questions. Why would anyone prefer a fictional relationship over a real one? Why choose the embrace of imagination when there are real people with warm hands, beating hearts, and lives that could intertwine with ours? The answer is both simple and complicated. Real relationships are unpredictable. They are filled with joys, yes, but also frustrations, disappointments, and pain. The person you love today might hurt you tomorrow. They might grow distant, lose interest, betray your trust, or simply fail to live up to the image you once had of them. Human beings are not consistent characters in a story. They are full of contradictions, sudden changes, and messy emotions. This unpredictability is what makes them beautifully real, but it is also what makes them difficult to love without fear. Now compare that to a fictional partner. A character in a story never truly changes beyond the boundaries of their narrative. They will never reject you, never ghost you, never walk away because of your flaws. They remain steady, consistent, dependable. They exist to fulfill the role they were written to play. If they are written to be kind, they will always be kind. If they are written to be loyal, they will always be loyal. They cannot disappoint you in the way real people can, and that alone makes them powerfully attractive. Think about the emotional safety in that. To love a character is to step into a space where heartbreak cannot reach you, where your vulnerability is met not with rejection, but with certainty. You can project your affection, your longing, your deepest desires onto someone who will never betray them. And in a world where so many carry scars from broken relationships, that safety can feel like paradise. There's also the appeal of perfection. Fictional characters can be designed to embody the exact qualities we find irresistible. They can be written to be endlessly patient, fiercely protective, brilliantly intelligent, or playfully charming, and unlike real people, they never contradict that design. They are ideals brought to life. distilled into forms that speak directly to our deepest needs. For someone who feels let down by reality, falling for a fictional partner is not about rejecting love. It's about finally experiencing the kind of love they always hoped was possible. But there is a cost, because fictional partners cannot love us back. They cannot hold us when we are tired. They cannot whisper comfort into our ears when the world feels heavy. They cannot build a future with us beyond the limits of their story. The love may feel real. The emotions may surge with genuine power. But at the end of the day, the relationship is one-sided. And if someone gives themselves too completely to that illusion, it can breed loneliness, isolation, and disconnection from the opportunities of real intimacy. Still, it would be wrong to dismiss fictophilia as a failure to connect for many. It is not an escape from reality, but a way of exploring love in a safe, imaginative space. Loving a fictional character can clarify what you truly desire in a partner. It can reveal your values, your dreams, the parts of yourself you long to share in some cases. It can even serve as a rehearsal for real love, teaching patience, loyalty, and emotional depth. So fictophilia and real-life relationships are not enemies. They exist on a spectrum, one rooted in imagination, the other in flesh and blood. Both carry lessons, both fulfill needs, both come with risks. The key is balance, to cherish the beauty of fictional love without letting it overshadow the messy, unpredictable, but profoundly rewarding connections that only reality can offer. Because in the end, fiction can teach us about love, but only reality can let us live it. So is it a problem? Whenever the subject of fictophilia comes up, the inevitable question follows: is this unhealthy? Is this dangerous? After all, how can it possibly be normal to fall in love with someone who doesn't exist? The truth, as always, is more nuanced than a simple yes or no. Let's start with the harmless side. For many people, fictophilia is nothing more than a form of escapism, a safe, creative outlet for emotions that might otherwise remain unexpressed. Think of it like daydreaming, or writing poetry, or listening to a song that makes you cry. Loving a fictional character can spark imagination, fuel creative writing or art, and even provide emotional comfort during lonely times. In this sense, fictophilia can be a positive force, a way of engaging with feelings that real life sometimes doesn't give us the space to explore. There's also the role of growth. Some people discover new things about themselves through their fictional loves. A character might awaken hidden desires, inspire new values, or help clarify what kind of person they truly want in a partner. Fictional affection can become a mirror for self-understanding, a guide toward personal insight. Far from being a problem, it can become a tool for emotional development. But like any powerful attachment, fictophilia has its shadows. The danger comes when the line between imagination and reality begins to blur too much. When the fictional relationship becomes not just a source of comfort, but a replacement for all other forms of intimacy. If someone spends hours obsessing over a character while withdrawing from friends, family, or opportunities for real love, the attachment can slide into isolation. Loneliness deepens, not because the love isn't felt, but because it isn't truly reciprocated. At its most extreme, fictophilia can become an obsession. A person might neglect responsibilities, avoid social interactions, or feel devastated when a character's story ends or changes in ways they cannot control. In such cases, the fictional love no longer supports emotional health. It undermines it. This is when psychologists compare it to other forms of parasocial attachment, where people bond deeply with celebrities or idols they will never truly meet. The feelings are valid, but the imbalance can cause suffering. Clinical perspectives generally avoid pathologizing fictophilia on its own. Instead, the focus is on impact. Is the person still living a full, balanced life? Are they maintaining real relationships, pursuing goals, caring for themselves? If the answer is yes, then fictophilia is usually seen as harmless, even enriching. But if the answer is no, and the fictional bond begins to close someone off from reality, then it becomes something worth addressing. The truth is, fictophilia is not inherently good or bad. It is a phenomenon of the human heart, and like all affections, it can nourish or it can harm depending on how it is lived. For some, it is an inspiration, a spark of creativity, a comfort in loneliness. For others, it is a trap, a cycle of longing that leaves them further from the connections they need. The difference lies not in the love itself, but in the balance between fantasy and reality. So, is fictophilia a problem? The answer is the same as for any love, real or imagined. It depends on how you live it, and how much of yourself you give to it. If fictophilia has always existed in quiet, hidden corners of human imagination, the internet has dragged it into the spotlight. Once upon a time, someone who fell in love with a fictional character might have thought they were entirely alone. They might have kept their feelings secret, unsure if anyone else could possibly understand. But with the rise of online fandoms, everything changed. The internet gave fictophilia a home, a place where scattered individuals could gather, share, and realize they weren't strange at all. Forums, fanfiction sites, social media groups, and fandom conventions created entire ecosystems where love for fictional characters was not just accepted, but celebrated. Suddenly, what once felt isolating became a source of belonging. Think of fanfiction. For example, these stories allow people to explore their relationships with characters more deeply than the original work ever allowed. Readers and writers alike expand on scenes, create new worlds, and even write themselves directly into the story through self-insert narratives. Fan art, cosplay, and video edits serve a similar role, giving physical, creative expression to an affection that otherwise lives only in the mind. In these spaces, fictophilia becomes collaborative. It's no longer just a private attachment, but part of a shared culture of imagination. But fandom culture doesn't just normalize fictophilia, it intensifies it. The constant stream of content, theories, alternate universes, and memes keeps the character alive far beyond the boundaries of their original story. For many, this is empowering. It stretches the life of the fictional relationship, sustaining comfort and joy across years. But for others, it can blur the boundaries between fantasy and reality even further, amplifying obsession and dependency. The internet, in this sense, is both medicine and poison. There's also the question of identity. For some, fandom spaces become places where people discover not only their feelings for characters, but also truths about themselves. A teenager who falls in love with a same-sex character, for example, might find the courage to explore their own sexuality. Someone drawn to strong, nurturing characters might realize what they've always longed for in real relationships. In this way, fictophilia becomes more than just escapism. It becomes a path to self-discovery, shaped and supported by the collective voice of a community. Yet, the internet also has its darker edges. Sometimes communities can become echo chambers, where the intensity of fictophilia is reinforced without balance. Instead of encouraging healthy integration between fantasy and real life, certain circles may normalize avoidance of reality altogether. And when fandom conflict arises, disagreements about a character, shipping wars, or even accusations of loving the wrong character, what was once a safe haven can suddenly become hostile and judgmental. Still, it is undeniable that without the internet, fictophilia would remain invisible, locked away in private journals and unspoken dreams. Today, it is visible, discussable, and even researchable. It has become a cultural phenomenon, woven into the fabric of online life, from memes to long essays, from fan art galleries to convention halls. Fictophilia now has a stage as big as the digital world itself. In the end, the internet has made fictophilia both more common and more complex. It has turned private fantasy into public culture, isolating shame into shared identity, and fleeting crushes into lifelong communities. Whether this is good or bad depends, as always, on how we engage with it. But one thing is certain: Fandom has transformed fictophilia from a hidden secret into a visible part of modern emotional life. At this point, we've explored what fictophilia is, how it functions psychologically, and how the internet has amplified it. But now comes the most mind-bending question. If our emotions are real, does it matter that the character isn't? This is where fictophilia enters the realm of philosophy and existential thought. When we say we love a fictional character, what are we really loving? Is it the character itself, or is it the idea of the character, the traits, ideals, and values they embody? Are we connecting to a fictional person, or to a reflection of ourselves, to a vision of who we want to be, or who we wish others could be? In a very real sense, fictophilia forces us to confront the blurry line between reality and imagination. Philosophers have long debated what makes emotions real. Stoics argued that true feelings come from judgments about reality, while existentialists suggested that the authenticity of an emotion is measured by how it shapes our experience. By this logic, loving a fictional character can be just as real, just as impactful, as loving someone who exists in flesh and blood. The brain doesn't always discriminate between imagination and reality. Neural pathways respond to imagined experiences in the same way as real ones. Your heart races, your mind aches, your joy swells, all for someone who will never exist outside a page or a screen. And that is real, some might ask. Is this dangerous? If our deepest emotions are invested in fiction, does it diminish our capacity for real relationships? Maybe, but maybe not. If anything, fictophilia can serve as a mirror, showing us what we value, what we desire, what we fear. Characters become a lens through which we examine ourselves, a safe testing ground for emotions we are not ready to risk in reality. In this way, fiction functions almost as therapy. And then there's the existential angle. If we consider that all human experience is filtered through perception and imagination, then all of our relationships, even real ones, are, in some sense, mediated by story. We construct narratives about friends, lovers, even family members. We fill in gaps with interpretation, idealization, and projection. So why should a fictional character be fundamentally different? The love we feel may be directed at a creation, but it is experienced entirely by a real consciousness, our own. And isn't that the ultimate truth of any emotional connection? Fictophilia also forces us to question what we mean by presence. Presence doesn't require physicality. It requires attention, empathy, and emotional engagement. If a character can occupy your thoughts, influence your moods, and inspire your actions, then they have a form of presence. A presence that can be as powerful, sometimes even safer, more idealized than real-life attachments. Finally, fictophilia invites wonder. It reminds us that human experience is not limited to the tangible, that imagination is not secondary, but central to how we feel, how we grow, and how we understand ourselves. In loving fiction, we are participating in a timeless human act, creating meaning, seeking beauty, and exploring the infinite possibilities of the inner world. So maybe the question isn't whether fictophilia is real or healthy. Maybe the question is what it reveals about us, about our hearts, our minds, our longing for connection, for perfection, for understanding, about the profound, sometimes unsettling truth that reality itself is always filtered through the stories we tell ourselves. As we reach the end of this journey, let's pause and reflect. Fictophilia is not just a quirky internet trend or a passing fascination with characters. It is a window into the human mind, the human heart, and the infinite ways we can experience love. Falling for a character who doesn't exist might sound strange, absurd even, but when you look closer, it is anything but trivial. It is a profound act of engagement, imagination, and emotional exploration. Through fictophilia, we learn that love is not constrained by physical reality, that the intensity of an emotion does not require reciprocity from a flesh and blood being, that our hearts can resonate with ideals, with stories, with the essence of what we desire most in connection, companionship, and understanding. In other words, When we fall for fiction, we are falling for ourselves as much as we are falling for the character. We are discovering the parts of us that crave beauty, stability, adventure, or comfort. We are confronting our hopes, our fears, and our deepest longings. Fictophilia also reframes how we think about intimacy in the real world. Intimacy can be messy, unpredictable, even painful. Fiction allows us to experience intimacy in a controlled space, where the emotional stakes are real but the risks are limited. Characters become trusted companions, confidants, teachers, and mirrors of the soul. They allow us to experiment with emotions, to reflect on our relationships, and to prepare ourselves subtly, unconsciously, for connections in the real world. It's important to acknowledge the delicate balance here. Loving fiction is harmless when it enriches your life, sparks creativity, inspires empathy, or provides solace. But like all intense emotional attachments, it can become unhealthy if it isolates you, prevents growth, or replaces real-world engagement. Awareness and reflection are key. Fictophilia, like any form of love, is most valuable when it illuminates, rather than obscures, our understanding of ourselves and others. Philosophically, fictophilia challenges our assumptions about reality, presence, and meaning. It asks us to reconsider the boundaries between what is real and what is imagined. If emotions are real, if experiences are felt, then the distinction between a real and fictional subject becomes less rigid. Perhaps the only essential truth is this: you are experiencing life. You are feeling, growing, dreaming, and loving, and that is as real as anything can be. In the context of human history, fictophilia is just a modern manifestation of timeless psychological and existential phenomena. People have always fallen for myths, gods, stories, and ideals. The only difference today is that media allows us to interact with these creations in unprecedented intimacy. Anime, novels, games, and interactive stories offer a depth of connection our ancestors could only dream of, and yet, the essence remains unchanged. We are reaching out for connection, understanding, and meaning. Finally, let us embrace both wonder and caution. Fictophilia is a reminder that our hearts are vast, capable of profound empathy and creativity. It reminds us that love is not confined to the tangible, and it also reminds us to remain grounded, to nurture our real-life connections, and to live fully in the world we inhabit. Falling for fiction is not a flaw, but a reflection of our capacity for imagination, growth, and self-discovery. So, as you navigate your own relationships with fictional characters, consider this: every story you engage with, every character you love, is teaching you something about yourself, about your desires, your boundaries, your ideals, about the beauty of imagination and the resilience of the human heart. Fiction is not just escapism. It is a mirror, a canvas, a companion. It is a space where love exists beyond reality, and in that space, perhaps we discover the deepest truths about who we are and what it means to love at all. Love beyond reality is not an anomaly. It is a testament to the infinite capacity of human emotion, to the ways we connect, create, and find meaning, and it leaves us with a simple yet profound truth: the stories we love may not be real, but the love we feel certainly is.